Ready.
Okay, I call to order the October 4th, 2022 meeting of the Salem Planning Commission. Before we do the roll call, though, we do have a swearing in for our new commissioner, Vera Brandel. So I think, Lisa, did you do that? Shelby?
I think I'm going to be doing it, Madam President.
Sounds great. Go for it.
All right. So if you just please repeat after me. Please state your name.
I, Robert Vieira Brandel,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States of America
that I will support the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America
and of the state of Oregon
and of the state of Oregon
and the city charter and ordinances of the city of Salem,
and the city charter and the ordinances of the city of Salem,
and that I will, to the best of my ability,
and that I will, to the best of my ability,
faithfully and lawfully perform the duties of Planning Commissioner for Salem
faithfully and lawfully perform the duties of Planning Commissioner for the city of Salem
during my continuance therein.
during my continuance therein.
Congratulations. We will get you a copy of that to sign and just return it to Shelby, Lisa, or myself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. So Shelby, now will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Augustine,
Here.
Commissioner Ickes, Commissioner Fott,
Here.
Commissioner Goebel,
Here.
Commissioner Griggs,
Here.
Commissioner Heller,
Here.
Commissioner Levin,
Here.
Commissioner Slater is absent, and Commissioner Vieira Brandel.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Shelby. Item 3, public comment. We don't have anybody signed up for this particular time on our agenda. Moving on to the consent calendar, I'll be looking to Commissioner Heller to make 2 motions. The first one is for items 4.1, 4.2, and then we'll have a 4.3 motion. So Commissioner Heller, do you have a motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to adopt 4.1 and 4.2 of the consent calendar, which includes the approval of the minutes and from August 2nd, 2022, and resolutions 2201 and 2202 for the Public Works Code amendments.
Thank you. Do we have a second on that motion?
Second by Levin.
Thank you. Discussion on that motion, and it's 2 resolutions, one on the trees and one on the UDC. So we need a discussion on that motion. Shelby, will you please call the roll? Signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion, nay if you are opposed.
Commissioner Augustine,
You're muted.
Commissioner Augustine,
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it, aye.
Commissioner Ickes,
Aye.
Commissioner Fott,
Aye.
Commissioner Goebel,
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Heller,
Aye.
Commissioner Levin,
Aye.
and Commissioner Vieira Brandel.
I believe I'm just going to abstain from this one, if that's all right.
Yep, thank you.
So motion passed. Commissioner Heller, do you have a second motion?
I do. I move to the approval of, it's on the consent calendar, 4.3, which is the street name change in case number SNC 22-01.
Second by Levin.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion? Shelby, will you please call the roll? Signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion, nay if you're opposed.
Commissioner Augustine.
Aye.
Commissioner Ickes,
Aye.
Commissioner Fott,
Aye.
Commissioner Goebel,
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Heller,
Aye.
Commissioner Levin,
Aye.
and Commissioner Vieira Brandel.
Abstain again.
Thank you.
Motion passed. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, the public hearings, item 5.1. Before we get into the meat of that, we all had a chance to review the meetings leading up to this hearing. So I'm going to have Shelby call the roll, If you were able to listen to all the meetings, the links that she sent last week, signify by saying aye when your name is called. But if you were unable to do that, simply state that you'll be abstaining from this vote. So Shelby, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Augustine?
Aye.
Commissioner Ekis?
No.
Commissioner Fott?
Aye.
Commissioner Goebel?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Levin?
Abstaining.
And Commissioner Vieira Brendel.
Aye.
And so following our legal counsel's direction, I think Commissioner Levin and Ekis, if you could not only silence your mic, but also turn off your camera for this part.
And so we're not able to ask questions either.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So when any conflicts of interest or statements, ex parte contacts or potential or actual conflicts of interest on this case before we continue, Commissioner Vieira Brandel.
So I have a not quite ex parte contact. I had reached out to Danae Medlock, who's running to be city councilor for this ward, just to get her view on it, because I don't know much about Kubler. But I never actually contacted with her, so I never got her opinion on anything, but I just wanted to be
Okay.
transparent.
Thank you for disclosing that. Any others? Not seeing any hands raised. Okay, Shelby, will you please read that statement of criteria?
This is a public hearing to consider a comprehensive plan change and zone change, case number CPC ZC 21-04 for property located on the 2900 block of Kubler Boulevard Southeast. The criteria applicable to this application are found in the Salem Revised Code, SRC, Chapter 64.025 E2 for comprehensive plan map amendments and 265.005 E1 for quasi-judicial zone changes. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The Planning Commission will then either continue the public hearing or leave the record open for at least 7 days.
Thank you, Shelby. Ms. Diaz, are you ready to take the mic?
Good evening. My name is Olivia Diaz. I'm the current planning manager for the planning division. We are here for CPC ZC 2104 remand of a case you've seen before. I would like to enter the new staff report, the presentation, and Cigna's comments into the record. Just a refresher, the subject property is located south of Kubler, west of I-5, in there, the Costco, the new Costco building on Boone, 27th and Kubler. Just a reminder, the property abuts a parkway, which is Kubler shown in red, a collector street, 27th, which is in yellow. So just a brief overview. So the last time the Planning Commission saw this case, the proposal was for commercial retail CR. The applicant submitted a revised proposal for commercial office CR and mixed use 2, which was what the public notice provided. The current proposal, as shown on the screen, is for a mixed use 2 and mixed use 3. So the mixed use 2 is this smaller section in the corner, and then this is the mixed use 3. Oh, I didn't change future. The zoning map is shown on the screen. Right now the property is zoned RA, which is residential agriculture. The property to the north is zoned CR, commercial retail, and where the current Costco building is zoned CR, also just to the west of the property. Just an aerial photo to remind everybody of where the property is. So the last time the Planning Commission saw this case, The main issue was traffic. And so the things that have changed since the last time it was before you is that the applicant has provided updated traffic counts that happened after the opening of Costco. The traffic engineer has reviewed those counts. They've also provided weekend counts to review the weekend when the commercial traffic is higher, performing intersection operational analysis with those counts. The applicant has shown the intersections that are required by the mitigation can meet the standards of the Salem code. And the applicant has also changed the proposal to mixed use, which allows for more traffic to be more spread out and the generations not all at one time. You did receive comments today from the South Gateway Neighborhood Association, and there was testimony submitted to City Council with similar items. Those are addressed in your staff report related to traffic concerns. Again, those were addressed, and the traffic staff believe that that it now meets the code and the state rules for a TPR analysis. And Kevin can talk more about that later. Cigna asked for some use restrictions. Staff does believe that with the MU2 and the MU3, that the majority of that has been resolved. The uses that are still possibly allowed would require a conditional use permit in most cases, which would require a public hearing. The change to the mixed use zones, which the applicant has proposed, and then the drive-throughs on the subject property, which staff has recommended a condition of approval for. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the comp plan zone change to mixed use and mixed use to 2 and 3 zoning with the conditions of approval. And I'm available for any questions.
Oh, you're muted, Shane. So yeah.
See, it's been 2 months and I already forgot. Commissioner Goebel, you've got the floor.
Thank you. I didn't want to talk without permission.
I know.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Olivia. I appreciate that. I have kind of a question just related to procedure. So the original submittal date was August 25th, 2021. And it was deemed complete now over a year ago. And my question related to that, and I know a lot of the concerns on my part originally were around, unnecessary extension of the process for the applicant. So my question is, when council heard this, and I listened to their discussion about it, and it seemed that they largely disagreed with our decision. And my question procedurally is why they decided to remand it to the Planning Commission rather than just denying it and allowing the applicant the opportunity to appeal to LUBA or pursue other routes for remediation.
I'm not sure. I don't believe that there was an actual an oral reason why. Dan maybe can chime in, but I don't believe that there was any discussion of a reason.
I didn't hear one.
Dan Atchison, City Attorney, I was at the City Council meeting that night, and if you watch the meeting video, then you know as much as I do.
Same.
Okay, I guess so. Follow-up question to that, and for future, for my future understanding of the purpose of a remand, my understanding is that and now with the applicant's proposal having changed, I know obviously a lot of other things have changed in terms of our decision-making process, but with the statements at council that I guess I was confused at the time when I heard the city council meeting as to just because I felt like we would then be put in a position if we were looking at the same proposal we had looked at originally of saying, okay, either we can agree with council and then the applicant would move on to I assume appeal or further pursue what they're trying to do, or then deny, if that makes sense, or sorry, disagree with council, in which case they would be able to call it up again.
Dan, did you have a comment? Maybe hand.
I think we're getting a little off track on a specific proposal, but the planning commission and the individual commissioners, duty here is to review applications based on the facts and criteria. Just because a council may or may not have disagreed with the decision the planning commission made, and it gets sent back to planning commission in one form or another, doesn't mean you need to change your decision. Your reasoning and your logic for making a decision is still that. And if you've changed your mind, or the facts have changed, or we provided different information, then you're welcome to come to a new decision. But you shouldn't feel that you're obliged to agree with what a council action was.
Thank you, Dan. I was, I think, just primarily trying to understand the purpose of a remand for future reference.
And this is a little odd, and Lisa could probably back me up here, but I believe this is the first time City Council has ever remanded an action. In LUBA, Land Use Board of Appeals procedures, they state reasons why you got it wrong and why they think you got it wrong, and how you can fix it. Council is not obligated to do that, and didn't do it in this case.
You good, Commissioner Goebel?
Yep, thank you.
Commissioner Heller, you had a question for Olivia.
Yeah, no, what I was trying to respond to Commissioner Goebel. What my take on that was, they wanted, the council wanted the neighborhood association, the staff, and the applicant to have more time to work together and maybe come up with a new proposal, which they did. So I instead of sending it up the line, and I think that was the right way to go.
Thank you. Any questions for Olivia on her presentation? Okay, we'll move to the applicant. As you well know, Mr. Shipman, I believe it's going to be you.
It is. Good evening, Madam President.
You bet. You have 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening, members of the Planning Commission. For the record, Mark Shipman, Land Use Attorney with Sawfield Griggs, 250 Church Street, Suite 200, Salem, Oregon, 97301. Here this evening on behalf of the applicant, Boone Road Commercial, LLC, and the property owner, Kubler Cascade View, LLC. Also here with me virtually this evening is Doug Sproul, the president and owner of Mosaic Development and Mosaic Management. He's one of the owners of both the applicant and owner LLCs. Doug is also the primary owner of the Boone Ridge development to the south of this property. Also with Doug is Jeremy Shanefelter. Jeremy's the director of development for Mosaic Development and Mosaic Management. Jeremy's been the primary contact with Jake Kirshnan of Cigna, and has worked very hard with staying in communication with Cigna. And then finally, Lacey Brown. Lacey is our traffic engineer with DKS Associates. It's good to be back before you tonight. It's been a while. Last time we were here, you approved our comprehensive plan zone change application request from RA to CR with 4 conditions of approval, which essentially focused on mitigation of traffic impacts. You determined that we either satisfy the approval criteria or could through conditions of approval. You also determined that our traffic consultant's testimony and evidence was compelling and showed that we would not degrade the transportation system in this area. None of this has changed. Your decision was appealed, and in the run-up to the city council meeting, the applicant met with city staff, Cigna, and repeatedly, and based on those discussions, decided to modify our rezone and comprehensive plan change request from 100% CR to the split mixed-use zoning, attempting to address staff's concerns, Cigna's concerns. But unfortunately, the city council was not comfortable with hearing that. And I think Commissioner Heller got it right. I think that in the discussions during the hearing, the city council was not comfortable hearing that as a matter of first impression. And if you recall, the mayor paused the hearing and asked for a recess because we were virtual. And as the applicant team, we needed to discuss what we're going to do. The mayor essentially was going to tee this up for denial, or I think in his mind, he felt like this was ripe for remand and it should have been remand. And they did. They agreed to remand it, which was the right decision. So the council had concerns with respect to the traffic analysis, and so they remanded. Back to you for further deliberations on this request. And before we formally brought this matter back to you, we knew that we needed to work out some of the wrinkles that staff felt were not supportable. This meant coming up with a mixed use zone for the property that staff felt comfortable with, and which has resulted in a request that centers on the more intensive permitted uses outlined by Olivia, orienting towards more of Kubler and retaining flexibility across the site to develop in accordance with the needs of the community through the MU3 and the MU2 zone. It also meant redoing our traffic report from the ground up, which DKS has done with great effort. What you will find with the request before you is that we have both planning and public works staff recommending approval on all points. No reservations, only conditions of approval in this case. Olivia did a nice job in explaining why the proposed MU3 and MU2 mixed-use zones on the property are appropriate and how the conditions of approval will allow the zoning to operate well, given the variety of potential uses in the vicinity. At this point, I'd like to turn briefly to address the current concerns as outlined by Cigna Chair Jake Krishnan in his September 19th letter to you. In their letter, Cigna essentially had three areas: drive-throughs, traffic caps, and restrictive conditions. Under drive-throughs, we believe that condition of approval number 1 addresses Cigna's concern. No more than 3 drive-throughs on the property, period. There's no movement there. Under traffic caps, I disagree with Cigna. Traffic caps work, and if you want to get a more expert opinion, ask Lacey, because staff will verify at each time a new development comes in onto the property. Every time a site plan review application is submitted, staff keeps track of this for the entire 24 acres of the property. And as each new development is applied for, Public Works staff will look at the Institute of Transportation Engineers Traffic Engineering Handbook. There is such a thing, and which lists every conceivable use known in the universe to verify the number of trips for that particular use. That number is then subtracted from the cap, and the allowed amount of traffic is then reduced on the site. That same exercise occurs time and time again each time a new use is proposed through a site plan review process until you hit 0. Under the restrictive conditions that Cigna wants to have placed on the property, there's a significant problem that we have with that approach is that, frankly, local governments don't like restrictive covenants because there's a real question as to who holds the right to enforce such a contract. Is that the city? Is that Cigna? Is that the neighbors? We don't know, and it's not easy to implement and enforce or change if needed or wanted by all the parties. The better approach is the one that was actually laid out by staff, which is allowing the zoning code and the land use process embedded in the code to be the limiting factor on whether a developer can put in a particular use or not. For those uses that are allowed, there's several land use processes. They're going to have to go through site plan review. They're also going to have to go through design review based on the mixed use zones. For those uses that are not allowed outright, permitted outright, then they're going to have to also go through a conditional use permit, site plan review, and design review. The conditional use permit process is that restrictor, and it's sufficient to achieve the goal that Cigna seeks to achieve. Now, as staff has noted, the biggest issue that has been overshadowing our application since the beginning has been traffic and the perceived concerns regarding the impact of development in this area versus the reality demonstrated by the data. Lacey Brown's going to address that reality and why our proposal still satisfies the transportation planning rule and what additional steps DKS took to ensure the proposal satisfies the TPR and the City of Salem requirements. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Lacey.
Lacey, there is 8 minutes remaining on your applicant.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
And could you state your name and address for the record, please? Even though
Yes.
I know we have it.
Yes, Lacey Brown with DKS Associates. Our address is 117 Commercial Street Northeast, Suite 310 in Salem, Oregon, 97301. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm the traffic engineer on record and led all of the traffic analysis through all of the phases of this application and the different iterations that we have prepared. So just a brief history, we've touched on this some, but for those that are new to the commission or have forgot last year already, we were in front of the Planning Commission in December of last year, where you approved the application with conditions of approval. In May, the City Council remanded that application back to the Planning Commission. And as was stated, encouraged the applicant to really work with city staff to gain that consensus, particularly with regards to traffic. So I want to start this by saying staff always agreed that the study was conducted appropriately, that it applied best practices and used the best data available. The main concerns were related to the data that was available just not being that great. And part of that was tied to the age of the traffic counts, which were conducted pre-pandemic, and collecting new counts during the pandemic wasn't ideal. So there was really no great way to solve that issue. And also the uncertainty of Costco related traffic. At the time that we prepared the original study, Costco was not yet open, and we were using estimates of what traffic could be for that type of land use, and there's inherent uncertainty in that. Some of the other concerns that were raised was just the general volume of potential traffic that could be generated under a commercial retail zoning, the uncertainty of weekend traffic conditions, which typically are not analyzed as part of the TPR study process, potentials for queuing on both 27th Avenue and Kugler Boulevard, and the applicant's original desire to pay a proportionate share of improvements at Kugler Boulevard and 36th Avenue instead of building that. So since May of 2022, we have done a lot of work, as Mark stated, not only to ensure that we're meeting the TPR criteria, but also to make sure that we were addressing staff's concerns. We did completely rewrite the TPR study using all new data, using this new mixed use zoning that you see before you in the application with a combination of MU2 and MU3 zoning. We collected new traffic counts for all study intersections that were conducted in May of 2022 after Costco was opened. And we also conducted those traffic counts on a Saturday during the peak hour of Costco operations as well. We did do the additional traffic analysis on a Saturday, which is the peak for a commercial weekend activity level. We did queuing analysis for both the weekday and Saturday peak periods. And the applicant has agreed to build all mitigations, and we've removed the recommendation for that proportionate share at Kugler and 36th. And you can see by the asterisk items on this list, a lot of this was above and beyond what would be required for a TPR analysis and to show that the TPR criteria were satisfied. But we went ahead and did this mostly to ensure that we met staff's concerns, or we addressed staff's concerns, and made sure that we were all confident that the transportation system could handle the additional traffic with the mitigations identified. So the findings of the new TPR study. The new volumes that we collected in May of this year, overall across the study area, were anywhere from 7 to 20% lower than our original data from May of 2019. The Costco traffic that we accounted for in our original study was almost identical to what's actually happening out in the field. The new data that we collected at Costco driveways was within 2% of our estimates originally. Using all of that new data, we reanalyzed the study area and identified the same intersections that will see an impact as a result of this zone change and would require mitigation. And we also identified the same exact mitigations that we previously identified. And with those mitigations, we are confident that all TPR criteria are satisfied, and we believe we've also met all of staff's concerns and addressed those appropriately. And lastly, just a reminder of what those impacted intersections are and what those mitigations are. There was 4 intersections that would be impacted by this zone change and comprehensive plan change. The first is Kugler Boulevard at Battle Creek Road, where the mitigation is to install a second southbound left turn lane. At Kugler Boulevard and 27th, the mitigations are to install a second northbound right turn lane, a second northbound left turn lane, as well as extending the storage for the westbound left turn lane that currently exists to provide adequate queuing space, and then install any signal modifications that are needed for those improvements. At 27th Avenue in the site access, which is the roundabout, the mitigation is to install a dedicated westbound right turn lane. Oops, I don't know why that disappeared. And the last one is to install a dedicated westbound right turn lane at the intersection of Kugler and 36th Boulevard for a total cost of approximately $4 million. And with that, I will answer any questions or hand it back to Mark.
Mr. Shipman, you have a couple of more minutes. I don't know if you want to use that time. You're muted.
I am. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I was earlier.
Does the Planning Commission have any questions of myself or of Lacey or of our of the applicant, the Mosaic Group?
Okay, we've got Commissioner Vieira Brandel up first.
Yeah, I have two questions. One's just kind of for my own edification here. Can you explain the traffic drop from May 2019 to May 2022, and just why you think that happened?
Yeah, primarily the best guess in the industry is just related to the pandemic and changes in travel patterns, more people working from home, working remotely, and changing their behaviors, maybe working different hours and not so much concentrated in the PM peak hour.
Did you have a follow-up question, Commissioner Vieira Brandel?
Yeah, I have one. It's not quite a follow-up, but it's a question for Mr.
Sure.
Shipman from the traffic cap discussion. What's the mechanism of enforcing those traffic caps? I mean, how does that work? I kind of looked for it, but I guess I don't quite get it yet.
Well, the mechanism, as I think, as I stated in my initial testimony, is that that's going to be in the planning record, and that's going to essentially be tied to this property for forever. And whether this property is partitioned or stays the same, that cap runs with that entire 24 acres. And so let's say that the Mosaic Group comes in their first development, they actually happen to land a natural food store, and that goes in, and let's say there happens to be 4,000 trips per day from that store, and I'm just going off the top of my head here. But in the case that what staff would do is they would essentially take that, they would look at the ITE manual, and if the ITE manual says it's 4,000 trips for a natural grocer food store, they would essentially go back to the applicant and say, we're deducting 4,000 trips from your 23,000 total. Therefore, you're left with 19. It's that simple. And then when staff actually issues their staff report, it's actually written in the staff report. And so you know that, hey, we started at the 23,000 figure, we're now down to 19,000. So the next time they have the new application that comes in, they're going to look at the IT manual for that specific use, and they'll do another subtraction based on whatever that use is. So it continues on, and it's something that staff, both planning and public works staff, are used to dealing with. We have instituted trip caps on a number of larger projects across the city in order to meet the TPR requirements over the past several years. So this is not anything new or unusual for us, for the applicant, or for staff.
Commissioner Vieira Brandel, did you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, just one short follow-up.
Sure.
Does the implementation of the traffic cap and the determination of that initial value, does that happen as part of this zoning and comprehensive plan change, or does that happen at a later time?
For the initial cap, that's happening as a part of this process, and it's actually contained in the conditions of approval as identified in the staff report. So if you take a look at condition of approval, number 5, Commissioner, it's in number 5, will not exceed the total trip generation of the 25,348. So it's codified.
Thank you.
You bet. Commissioner Goebel.
Thank you. I just wanted to express my appreciation for the amount of effort and time that the applicant put into this and the expertise. It's really impressive to see them working with city staff to come to a compromise that I know how much went into this, and I really appreciate all of the work that went into getting something that works for everybody.
Thank you, Commissioner Goebel. Other questions for the applicants? I think you did such a great job, Mr. Shipman. You're off the hook for right now. And we'll turn now to the Neighborhood Association. I believe it's Mr. Krishna is the Cigna chair that would like to speak. And name and address for the record, please. And you have 10 minutes.
Good evening, President and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Jake Krishnan, and I'm the chair of Cigna. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at this hearing. I've already provided my written testimony, and I think Olivia and Mark and they've all addressed most of the points raised there. So thank you for that, and thank you for the excellent collaboration. We had a lot of intense discussions with Jeremy from Mosaic Development, so that was a great process. Thank you for the conditional use clauses too. Mark, thank you for drawing attention to the points raised by us. The updated traffic report is certainly a great positive step in alleviating our concerns. I will not belabor the points already addressed in the updated staff report. Instead, just focus on the traffic cap point, which is what I'm probably denser than all of you folks, so I'm not that smart here. But one thing that I was trying to understand is if the condition is that the site shall not exceed 25,348 vehicles per day. And you talked about the process of metering and talking about how at each point of successive development, the developers would be told how much is left over from the earlier balance. I guess my point is at the time when the layout is fully developed, and let's say the very first time it crosses 25,349, is this enforcement being done on a day-to-day basis, or is it going to be done on a monthly or quarterly or other periodic frequency? Because that's where my kind of concern is. Obviously, there is no gate to say, hey, we've crossed the 25,348 at 3:45 p.m. today. Let's stop all vehicles on the road, right? That's not going to happen. That's where my basic point was addressed to, not about the way in which you can count it on or enforce it for future developments. So that is the only point that I had. The rest of it, I think you've addressed it, and thank you for all that. Thank you for considering my points while making a decision.
Thank you, Mr. Krishna. And when we have questions of staff, we've got another opportunity as commissioners to ask questions. We'll bring that up so that we can all get some more clarity on that question. Any questions for Mr. Krishna from commissioners? I am not seeing any raised hands. So now we can ask questions of staff. Olivia, I don't know if you want to take this one or if you want to punt it to Kevin. But on the trip cap question that Mr. Krishna just had, how is it? And I think that's probably what Commissioner Vieira Brandel was alluding to also, is how is it enforced? We know how the number is derived, but how does that become enforced?
I'm sure Kevin and I can do it together. So my understanding is that there's a manual that tells you how much trips a commercial development generates, a hotel generates, each individual use generates based off of a square footage. And so any development would have to come in for site plan review. That's something that staff reviews for every building, parking lot, anything that's being developed on a property. And so every time we do a building or a development, they have to identify a use. That use is ran to traffic. Traffic looks at the square footage, the use, and determines what the trips are for that use based on that manual. So no one's out there, with a clicker on a daily basis counting trips. It's based off of this, traffic manual. And each time we do a building, we deduct from that total trip cap. So at no point will it exceed that trip cap based off of the traffic manual and the buildings being built under site plan review. And I'll let Kevin.
You said it.
Any holes? Okay.
Yeah, when they submit a building plan, they submit a trip generation estimate form that they're then required to pay trip fees for, and they describe the square footage of the use, and then we determine the trips, and basically we keep track of that per site. So if the site gets sold, the condition is conditioned on the site. So we'll always keep a track of that, and as Livia said, that's how we know where they're at. there won't be a daily count or any of that stuff. It's based on square footage.
So I think we're all clear on how the numbers arrived, but we don't have a person monitoring saying, hey, we've got too many trips coming out of this. Even though you said you were going to have, 12,000, you've got 12,001.
Well, we do in that if they start getting close to the 25,000 trips when they submit, one of their last pieces for development, and they say, we're going to build this size square footage. And we say, well, you're going to go over trips. So you're going to have to have a smaller development for that last piece or last two pieces or whatever triggers at 25,000. So the control at the end is that we would limit a building size or a building use based on what the trips left that are available.
Commissioner Heller, you have your hand raised.
Thank you. Okay, I think maybe the question is, how do you know? How do you know? Do you actually track them? Are those little hose things that go across the street? I mean, how do you know that it's that they're not getting 30,000 rather than the 20 plus?
The trip generation manual that we use to determine how much traffic is generated by development is based on lots of different studies across the country. So it says that in general, for instance, office generates 11 trips per 1,000 square feet, whatever it is. So it's based on national studies of multiple buildings of the same type, and they come up with, this is what it generates, and that's what then we follow, because we can see development, we can see building size, but we can't see some of the other stuff.
Commissioner Howard, did you have a follow-up?
Oh, yeah, I still, okay. I'm really in favor of this. I think it's a very, very good compromise, but I'm just trying to learn. So you really don't, you just use basically a manual. You really don't count the number of trips. Is that where I'm going?
Yes, we don't physically count the trips. We base it off of other studies that says this type of development and this square footage generates this amount of trips.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And that's standard practice, isn't it, Kevin? I mean, amongst all cities to do that one.
Yeah.
We do that outside of this process. So even to submit a building permit, they have to hit a threshold. We use that process to see if they hit that threshold or not.
Okay, thanks, Olivia. Commissioner Vieira-Brandl, you had a question?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the process for this is probably pretty similar to the process that was used to determine the trip counts to the Costco, which I believe Lacey Brown said was accurate to 2%, which is pretty good. So that, seems like it's probably a good way to do it. And since this is all being done, obviously kind of in the shadow of Costco, just from my own understanding of kind of how this works, do you know what the trip number for a store like Costco would be? Like if they decided to use the entire allotment in one development, one building, what would that number be for a store like a Costco? Would it be 23,000 or whatever the allotment is, or would it be significantly more?
I don't know what the trip rate was for Costco that Lacey used. It is correct that DCAS did a very good job of the estimate for Costco was very good in what it was, but what the applicant did was they did a reasonable worst case study of what could happen on their site, and that's what this trip cap is. So they said, these are the things that we think we can build on this site, and this is how we're going to mitigate it. And so that's what this is based on. It's based on what they think they want to and can put on this site. And that's where the trip cap came from.
Follow-up question, Commissioner Vieira-Brandl?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm thinking out loud here. I apologize. If the trip cap value came from what they believe is the worst case scenario for the site. What does it do then? Because it's not limiting anything if we're already at worst case.
Well, they are there. It's a reasonable worst case. So they've come up with a combination of uses that they feel are reasonable and likely to develop on this site. But it could, something could come up later, and they could say, well, we want to do this, which nobody thought of, and all of a sudden it's a very high trip generation, and it was never thought that it could be possible. And I don't know what that would be. Maybe Disneyland as an extreme. But what the trip cap does is they've looked at it, it's been studied, they've come up with mitigation, and their expectation is that they won't go above that. They'll probably be below it. And that's what reasonable. If they wanted to do the worst case, they could say, well, we're going to put some huge thing, and they would have all this extra mitigation that they would have to do, and that wouldn't be reasonable. So it's good to the trip cap is good to have, because it kind of keeps a guarantee that everything won't go be developed too much, and that the mitigation doesn't accommodate it.
Thank you. And I think Dan's got his hand raised to add some comments.
Clarification for Kevin, the reasonable worst case scenario is based on the existing zoning of what they could build today. So that cap is based on what their existing zoning is. So it's lower than what the reasonable worst case would be under their proposed zoning.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? I would like to make a comment. We didn't have anybody, I believe, signed up to testify, so we've moved through that section. Seeing no other questions of staff, would the applicant like to spend 5 minutes rebutting anything that you heard?
No need to rebut.
Okay, thank you. So is there anybody who would request that the record be kept open? Yay. Then I'm going to close the hearing, and I'm going to look to you, Commissioner Heller, for a motion. I didn't give you a warning, but without Commissioner Levin, you're my next go-to.
All right. I move that we accept the applicant's proposal for a change in case number CPCZC 21-04 with the recommendations of the staff.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Goebel. So we've got a motion on the table and a second. So let's discuss. I really do want to echo what Commissioner Goebel said. I think this is a great compromise as a result of a lot of work, I know, between the neighborhood association and the applicant and city staff. So there was such a sigh of relief when I got that packet. I'm going, oh, yay. So just would like to start off with that comment. Anybody else? Okay, well, sure you don't want to talk about anything? I think staff has laid it out very well. I think the conditions of approval really should allay many of the concerns from the neighborhood association. So, and if there are no other comments, then I will look to Shelby to call the roll. Please signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion, nay if you are opposed.
Commissioner Augustine?
Aye.
Commissioner Fott?
Aye.
Commissioner Goebel?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
And Commissioner Vieira Brendel?
Aye.
Motion passed. So now Commissioner Levin and Commissioner Ekus, you can join us again if you like for the remainder of the meeting. We don't have any special orders of business nor any information reports, and nobody signed up for public comments. So Lisa Anderson Ogilvie, Planning Administrator's report.
Yes, great. Well, October is planning month, which I sent, I think, all of you in an email. So There is a proclamation at City Council next week, and Commissioner Heller will be attending to receive the proclamation on behalf of the Planning Commission. So that's on Monday, the 10th. The 10th, yeah. And then for the first time ever to celebrate Planning Month, we're having an event that we've put together. Usually every year it's like mid-September, and we're like, oh dang, we were going to do something and it's too late. So we actually plan something in advance. So if any of you want to attend next Tuesday from 4 to 6 at 440 Food Hall, we will be having we're calling it Planner Palooza. I'll send you the flyer. We just finished the flyer today. We're going to have some games and like ask a planner a question and some food for people and some prizes, and we'll just see who shows up. So if nobody comes to talk to us specifically, we're going to accost people as they're getting their food and their beer. And do you want to build a fence? I can help you. So yeah, we're excited about that. The other thing, and Commissioner Slater's not here, so I was going to say the resolutions tonight. One is for the city tree code. Those both of those resolutions that Public Works had tonight, they're going to bring back for a public hearing, I think early November. And I know it was a few years ago, we talked a lot about the city, the street tree chapter, and how the appeals for that were kind of weird because they could go to the Parks Board, even if the Planning Commission had approved a design that removed a street tree. And so these amendments are intending to fix that. So normally maybe we don't look at street trees at the Planning Commission, but that's why those amendments are coming to you all. So keep that in mind when we go through that hearing, that we're trying to fix that weird problem. I think that's all I have.
Any news on going live?
We are continuing to have technical difficulties in the council chambers. Yes, Shelby and I have been, we've done site visits, we've done temporary cameras, we've tried to get CC Media to stream our meetings for no money. That oddly didn't work. So we are still trying weekly to solve our issue. So we might be able to do something with temporary cameras that would just kind of pan to people, but it wouldn't be like a close-up of you. So it'd like show the whole room. So it's not maybe the best solution.
Well, ultimately we go back just the way we did it before. We just are live and CC Capital Community Media would just record.
Well, they never recorded us before, so they only do city council. And so the city doesn't pay them to do more than that. So
could we ever go back to the way we did it and not having it recorded? Dan.
Oh, good. Dan is here.
Dan.
So while you were away at COVID, the legislature was busy and passed a bill that it says to the extent reasonable, you've got to allow electronic attendance.
Oh.
So the technical difficulties might be that it's unreasonable to do it, but at this point, we're trying to figure out a way to do it and fully comply with the new requirements.
Okay, that makes sense. Questions for Lisa? Okay, we'll move on to the last segment. Commissioner Vieira Brando, this last one, comments for the good of the order. You can just really say anything, but I would like to just say welcome to the commission. It's good to have you there and to fill that seat. And my hat is off to you for jumping in and listening to all that you had to listen to prepare for tonight's hearing. So kudos to you. And thank you, Lisa Heller, for stepping in for Ian and I on Monday. Commissioner Fott, I think did you have your hand up, Commissioner Fott? There you go.
Yes. This is just a sort of thing to note. Yesterday was World Architecture Day, and just wanted to maybe do a shout out to take an extra look at the built environment around all of us and consider it. That's why we're here.
Hey, and Commissioner Vieira Brando, I meant to ask you earlier, do you want to just spend a few minutes telling us something about you?
Sure, I can do that. I did grow up in Salem. I went to North Salem High School, so.
Go Vikings.
Yep, thank you. I went to Chemeketa for a couple of years and then Oregon State. I have a degree in chemical engineering, so I have an engineering background, and then I ended up going to law school recently at Lewis and Clark. So I'm an attorney today. I have an office downtown, and I'm actually pretty interested in land use. So this is a really good opportunity for me, and I look forward to everything that I'm going to learn here.
Well, welcome. Good. Commissioner Ekus, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I wasn't able to go through all the past material, so I wasn't able to participate in that debate. But I did want to say here at the end that I hope others of both neighborhood associations and developers who follow things take note of what I agree with Commissioner Goebbels that this seemed like, while it took a long time and it may have been remanded, but it was a process that worked in the long run and reached a reasonable and I think very good conclusion. And I just wanted to add a note to those comments that were said, and hope that people that do participate in this process, both from the developer and the applicant standpoint and the neighborhood association standpoint, are able to take note of that. I think we've had previous examples, but this to me is another example of how we're able to come to a good solution by communicating and perhaps compromising.
Thank you, Commissioner Ekus. Well said. Any other comments? I noticed too, Lisa Anderson Ogilvie, we don't have any items to date for October 18th, but you'll keep us in touch.
Yeah, we might have something, and so we'll know later. Shelby and I were talking about it today. We'll know early next week, and we'll let you know.
Okay, great. Any other comments? If not, I will adjourn this meeting, and we'll see you the next time. Thanks.